I felt that if you're dedicated, if you have determination, and you've got diplomacy and discipline, those were my 4Ds, and those 4Ds certainly helped me in my career, and they still do to this day.
People are so precious and so important.
You can't beat love, Shirley.
Well, that's what they tell me.
Welcome to Elder Wisdom, Stories from the Green Bench. My name is Erin Davis, and today I have the pleasure of sharing the company of two lovely, funny, and charming gentlemen. And one of them is my co-host. And in a moment, you're going to meet Doug Robinson. He's 87 and lives at Sandalwood Park in Brampton. It's just one of the Schlegel Village's retirement and long-term care residences. And this podcast is the brainchild of the Schlegel family. It's long been patriarch Ron Schlegel's belief that, and I quote, "The greatest untapped resource in Canada, if not the world, is the collective wisdom of our elders." The perfect example is today's guest. Harold Quinn resides at the Village of Arbour Trails in Guelph. He's 92, and his philosophy is, if I can't eat it or read it, I don't need it. He's hungry to learn and eager to chat, so let's go. Well, Doug, it is so nice to be with you, especially for our 50th episode in our 4th season here on the Green Bench. How about that, huh?
Hey, you can't beat that, Erin. It's all because of you. You're the true professional.
Oh, no. This is truly a team effort. And you know what? We wouldn't have nearly as many downloads or listens to our podcast as the 75,000 plus that we have now gratefully and humbly accrued, were it not for the wonderful guests like our Harold Quinn, who is 92 years old. As we've mentioned, he resides in the Village of Arbour Trails in Guelph. He's there with Katie Lammert, who is making sure that everything goes just perfectly today, and now I've jinxed it. But how wonderful to have you with us, Harold. So hark, it's Harold's turn to not sing, but shine, and here he is. Welcome, Harold. Thanks for joining us.
Well, it's a pleasure. I question whether or not I should be classed with anybody who is speaking from a base of wisdom, but
oh, come
we'll
on.
See.
You've got a PhD in chemistry. I mean, really.
Yes.
And you worked...
That was a long time ago.
Oh, yeah. But you know what? What we've learned about you and what we're going to learn in the next 30 minutes or so, I think we will prove without a shadow of a doubt that you have not lost an ounce or a gram or whatever chemists say in your sharpness. So thank you so much for joining us. We've got a lot of questions for you. And of course, we're sort of focusing on community, and you are someone who loves to bring people together. So let's bring Doug back in here on the Green Bench. And Doug, kick it off for us, will you, love?
Yes, certainly. Harold, Schlegel Village founder Ron Schlegel has said the greatest untapped resource in Canada, if not the world, is the collective wisdom of our elders. These words inspired the creation of the Green Bench, which we are sitting on today. You tapped into some of this knowledge, expertise and experience in the peer learning group. Can you tell us more about the peer learning group that you were part of?
Well, it was an activity group in the village by the Arboretum, a retirement community, which is on the same site as Arbour Trails. It was called peer learning because the programming is all based on talks given by residents of the community. That's where the peer learning bit came in. And I was a facilitator of that for 7 years. When my wife's health became such that I couldn't continue with that, no one else held up their hand to take it over, it went into abeyance. But I had previously bought a couple of courses from the U.S. firm called The Great Courses. One was entitled The Neuroscience of Everyday Life. And I started looking at that on my computer, and I said, why am I sitting here watching this all by myself? There may be others who would be interested as well. So I made some inquiries, and some others thought so too. So we started a group called Learning Together. And these are courses with anywhere from 12 to 36 half-hour lectures, with the same lecturer for the whole course. And when I started that, I had about 20 to 25 people coming out. Sometimes it went up to as high as 40. But then when that course had ended, we had purchased some more. And so I think it's my 5th course that I'm on right now, which is called the World's Greatest Geological Wonders.
Ooh, tell us one.
Well, give an example. Tomorrow morning we'll have one, and the first lecture is entitled The Grand Canyon, the Earth's Layers. And we run 2 in a 1-hour period. And the second is entitled The Himalayas, the Roof of the World.
Wow. So you go from the bottom to the top.
Yes.
Wow.
We've already dealt with one that was Canadian-based so far, and that is the slate fossil area in the Rockies. But I have about 20 people coming out to this lecture so far.
Do you discuss them afterwards?
No, because I don't think there's any one of us who is able to answer questions that some other might have.
Harold, you say you watch TVO. They have so many interesting programs on there. The other night I watched one, and it was about the 5 lakes, Great Lakes. And I didn't realise how many wild animals live around our lakes. And they have one lake, I'm not sure which one it was, where they have a 250-year-old sturgeon swimming around. It's so fascinating to watch something like that.
Well, that might well be Lake Superior, which is the deepest of the lakes.
Yeah.
We need to know which lake so I never swim in.
Old age creeping in, I couldn't tell you.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I will take Harold's take on that it might well be Superior. Did you do a lot of traveling in your job and with your wife in your life to kind of see some of these extraordinary places up close and personal, Harold?
Well, we traveled a little bit while I was still working. It was usually as a result of my having to go somewhere and work, and my wife went along. But most of our travel has been after I retired. In the 90s and the first decade of this century, we did a lot of traveling. The furthest from here was Japan.
Ooh.
Well, our eldest son, who's a veterinarian, was working in Japan at that time, and he stayed there for 8 years. But we went on an organized tour, and, of course, we saw Mount Fuji. Mm-hmm. And Mount Fuji is on this list of the world's greatest geological wonders.
Really? Wow. So it's a little like a busman's holiday to go to these places that so fascinated you in your life. And now, of course, you are an avid reader and you're also on your computer a lot. I know Doug wants to talk to you about reading, but first, my hat is off to you because you opened your mind to opening your computer. And as I think you said, you went like 74 years without one, and now you wouldn't live without one.
Well, I guess I would continue to live, but not happily.
There you go.
Too true.
Well, it's the source of so much information. Disney Plus has some wonderful travelogues.
Yes. So beautiful. Oh, that's wonderful. People don't know what they're missing if they're not, opening the computer and having the world at their fingertip. It is like reading, isn't it, Doug?
Yes, sure is. Harold, I'm an avid reader too, and my go-to authors are John Grisham, Ken Follett, David Baldacci, and Jeffrey Archer. Who do you like to read?
I've read a number of Ken Follett's books.
Yeah.
I like historical fiction.
Yeah.
But recently, I've been reading a number of books by Kate Quinn, no relative. But, the first one that I read was The Alice Network, which was a very popular book. But she has written 3 more with sort of 20th century wars as the setting. The second in that was A Huntress. The next one was The Rose Code, and her most recent one is Diamond Eye. And she builds a story around real people who were doing something during the war, either the First or Second War. And it becomes really a very fascinating story.
And again, that author's name is Kate Quinn, in case anyone's looking for it. And Doug, while we're here, I will recommend to you Linwood Barclay.
Yes.
An Ontario writer. And he gets shout-outs from Stephen King. He's just the most marvelous writer. What is it, Harold, that reading gives to you? And I do love that you love historical-based fiction or stories that can kind of open our eyes to things that did or might have gone on in a certain period of history of which we know but seem to know so little.
Well, as you already know, I was trained as a scientist, and I worked in industry for 32 years, chemical industry, and while I was working, I didn't have a lot of time to read casual reading, if you like. It all had to be related to science or the type of work I was doing. But I find the Kate Quinn books more interesting than the Ken Follett because I can relate more to what was happening in the 20th century.
Yes, yes.
Ken Follett was largely back in the 16th, 17th century.
Yeah, actually, Harold, he's just written a new one on today's events. He has a lady president in the States. He has a character after the Donald Trump and North Korea, China. It's a very fascinating read.
It certainly sounds like fiction, though.
Oh, it was fiction.
Oh,
the A-bomb went off.
Thanks for the spoiler there very much. Honestly. Oh, Doug.
I hope I live to see a woman as Prime Minister of Canada. I doubt that I'll live to see a woman as President of the U.S., although it would be nice, I think, for that society.
We did have a lady Prime Minister.
Yes, that's right, Kim Campbell.
Well, not that we elected.
No, yeah.
That was just for a cup of coffee
Right.
and a few paintings, but that was it.
That's right, yes.
Now, Harold, you are not only an avid reader, but you've also written a memoir for your grandkids. That's fascinating. Why was that important to you?
Well, after I retired, I started working on our family genealogy, and I realized that I wished I had talked more with my grandparents. And as a matter of fact, I realized also that I didn't really talk about their history with my own parents as much as I should have done because I can't tell you how they met. So I decided that while I'm still around, it would be not a bad idea to document my life and hope that it might be of some benefit for my grandchildren down the road.
That's great because we don't even know the questions to ask when we're young. I mean, it wasn't until my grandparents had their 50th anniversary that we found out my grandmother had been married before my grandfather. I mean,
oh, really?
I'm telling you, there were a few spilled beers over that news. I'll tell you what. But yeah, you got to be careful the questions you ask. But Harold, I'm assuming somewhere back not too far, your people came from the old country, right? They came from Ireland?
From Ireland,
Yeah.
Oh yes, for certain.
Yeah.
I have a few drops of English and Scottish blood in me, but not enough that matters.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, hey, English does matter. You're
Yeah,
all right.
Doug has a few drops of scotch in him, so there you go. Oh, my goodness. And you know what? I love what you've said, Harold. Of course, everything so far, but that there are two types of residents, those who wait to be entertained and those who make it happen. And this reminds me of something I used to say to our daughter as a teenager, and it was just another reason for her to dislike us then. But if she would say, I'm bored, I'd say, only boring people get bored. Find something interesting. And, you know, nobody wants to hear that. But it kind of resonates in what you've said. What advice would you give to somebody who's waiting to be entertained about making it happen themselves?
Well, some of those, of course, are individuals who are suffering some memory loss.
Yeah.
They're still able to live independently or semi-independently here. Our recreation department does a phenomenal job. There's almost no day in the week when something isn't happening that is intended to entertain, whether it be musical or movies. We have a movie crew which meets the first week of the month to choose movies for the next month, and it's basically led by a member of the recreation group.
Can you tell us some of the movies that people see there at the Village of Arbour Trails?
We have 8 or 9 movies a month. The last one I saw was The Road to Perdition.
Oh, with Paul Newman.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Not a happy movie, but
Yeah.
No, but considered to be one of Tom Hanks' best performances, but it's so overshadowed by everything else he's done.
yes.
Wow.
But we try to, over the course of the month, to have at least one comedy, at least one musical, at least one crime story, maybe a life story, a documentary based on someone's life.
Yeah.
At any rate, we like to vary the entertainment. The number of people who come, range from half a dozen to 20 or so. But for me, I noticed that there was nothing on Saturday evenings. And that's how the Saturday Night Comedy Hour came into being.
Don't tell me you do stand-up comedy.
No, far from it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But my wife has been 4 years in long-term care now, and with Parkinson's and dementia. But when dementia became part of the picture while I was still caring for her, I bought a set of Carol Burnett discs. We used to watch Carol Burnett religiously. Mm-hmm. And does that name ring a bell with you at all?
Oh, God, yes, of course.
Harold, do you know what? I have danced with Carol Burnett.
Oh, really?
Yes, I had a lovely dance with her. It was at Elizabeth Taylor's 50th birthday party.
Oh, really?
Yeah, how about that one?
Yeah.
Well, you can't just drop those names and not tell us, how were you at the party, Doug?
Well, they were making a movie back in 1985-86, and it was a movie made for HBO, and Elizabeth Taylor and Carol Burnett had the top floor of the Four Seasons. And then, as I said, it was Elizabeth Taylor's 50th birthday, so all the crew members that were doing the film were invited to her birthday party. And at that time, she was going with the Mexican called Lacuna. And we had a really nice birthday party for her. And, of course, they had a huge cake there, which, of course, didn't get eaten. So Doug took it home with him because my wife's birthday is the same day as Elizabeth Taylor's. So my wife got Elizabeth Taylor's birthday cake for her birthday.
Lovely. And listen in for more chapters from the story of Doug Takes the Cake. Oh, that's fantastic. By the way, that film was called Between Friends, and it was released in 1983.
Oh, really?
Okay, but you're talking about her sitcom. You're talking about her variety show.
That's correct. I have discs with about 30 of her programs, but I also have some Bob Hope discs, Red Skelton, but I've just started the last couple of weeks bringing up Wayne and Shuster Canadian programs on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
Most of the people here can relate to all of those folk.
Great.
Yeah.
And even the comedy of Red Skelton, there was this one sketch that he did where he was turning 70. I think it was the Royal Command performance for HBO. And so he says, I play a lot of retirement homes. I'm in the States, this one called Sun City in Arizona. And he says, I'm old. And this woman there, this little old lady, he says to her, how old are you? And she says, 84. And he said, what do you do for excitement? And she said, oh, we date. I had a date with a fellow that was 91, the rascal. I slapped him 3 times. And Red Skelton says to her, you mean he got fresh? And she said, no, I wanted to see if he was still alive.
That's Red Skelton.
It sure is. And you know what? When you asked Harold if the name Carol Burnett rang a bell, I have to tell you that in the past year, you've probably not been able to avoid promos or commercials for an AMC series called Better Call Saul. Well, Carol Burnett had a really important role in the final season of this hit AMC show. She was in about 4 episodes, a really critical role. And now, as a result of this, you'll be very happy to hear that in an online internet poll of everybody, probably 15 to 85, who said, who do you want to host SNL this season? Carol Burnett came number one.
Yep.
Number one.
Saturday Night Live, yep. Harold, when a new resident comes into our Sandalwood here, I go over and I introduce myself to them, and I like to know their nationality so that I can say good morning to them in their own language. I have learnt to say Kat Sri Akal in Punjabi, Buongiorno in Italian, Bonjour in French, Guten Morgen, wie geht's in German, and Dzień dobry, Sasamash in Polish, and in Greek, Kalispera, Diganis, Galagalev Storsi. That's how I introduce myself to new residents, Harold.
Wow.
How do you go about it?
In general, I say, hello, my name is Harold Quinn. And usually I have found their name somewhere. We have one couple that moved in not too long ago, and I happened to see a bouquet down in the town square with their name on it. So I followed up on that, and I've become quite good friends with them. But, if I see somebody new in the dining room, I usually introduce myself. And I was very fortunate, of course, you see. When I moved here from Village by the Arboretum, about 30% of the residents here had been former residents of Village by the Arboretum. So there were a lot of familiar faces, and I felt quite at home. But I realized that, the other 70% are not from the Village by the Arboretum, and this is a new experience for them to move into this arbor community, if you like. So there's nothing lost by introducing yourself to a newcomer.
No, none at all.
One thing I didn't mention is that Recreation has on Tuesday mornings at 10:30 a little event called Meeting of Minds. And the Recreation representative shows, we have the choice of 2 or 3 different TED Talks. Mm-hmm. And we identify one that might be of interest, and the TED Talk is shown, and then we meet and discuss the subject that it was dealing with.
Oh, I like that.
And we have about a dozen people coming out to it, yes.
Yeah.
The TED Talk this past Tuesday was on what for you is home. And most of us have had many homes over the year. I did a count, and I think this is the 15th place that I've lived since I was born.
Wow.
And it's very interesting to see what people come up with, but of some significance, certainly to Schlegel's, is that most of us said, for us now, this is home.
Oh.
And when we come home, we come back to Schlegel's.
Wow.
To Arbour Trails.
That's so true, Harold. I've been in here nearly 3 years now, and I have a room, but it's my home. I feel so happy there. I can go and sit in, watch my TV with the Dean Martin roasts and have a laugh on my own and what have you. But Schlegel make you feel real at home. They really do.
Well, the advantage that we have, you see, is if we want to be by ourselves, we go back to our suite and do what we wish to do.
Yep.
If we want company, we just go down to either the dining room, where all of us show up at least twice a day, or the town square, or the town hall, and find social activity.
Boy, you know what? This sounds really corny, but I love the sound of where you are. Where you are in your lives, both of you, where you're living, that sense of community. And frankly, my husband and I live alone in this house and quite apart from a small town nearby. I'm actually envious of your sense of community that both of you have. I think the last 2 years have made us all kind of lean into our hermetic existences. And yet, there you are. You've pushed through. You've masked your way to still being together. And as I say, I know it sounds corny as heck, but I'm actually envious of you both.
Well, we moved to Guelph in 2010 to be closer to our youngest son and his wife. But we bought a house in Village by the Arboretum. And it's also called a village for that same reason, for a sense of community. There are 500 individual houses and then about 90 condos, which make up part of that village. But there are 90 different activity groups.
Wow.
And so anyone moving there has ample opportunity to get involved in something that is of interest to them.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you, if we didn't have grandkids a 6-minute drive away from here, I'd be telling Rob to pack us up. But do something about your winters, will you? I do like it here on Vancouver Island.
Well, I can appreciate that.
You're a chemist. Do something.
Well, I'll tell you, climate change may solve any problems or introduce new problems for you.
Yes, and it's good to hear you say that. Because, well, it's not good to hear you say that, but you know what I mean. There are so many deniers, inexplicably. Let's talk a little bit about where your memoir that you've written might begin, because you started on a farm, very poor. How did you get your way to a PhD? Can you give us the Coles notes, as we used to say on that one, Harold?
Well, we didn't think we were poor, because everybody around us, other farmers, were just the same way.
Right.
But I had a one-room elementary school about a mile away that we walked to, if the weather was favorable. And then I took a bus to a high school in a village about 15 miles away. At any rate, it was my science teacher in that high school that stimulated my interest in chemistry. And I don't want to brag, but I was a pretty good student.
Clearly.
Obviously.
Yeah.
And for me, living in that area, Queen's University was the only one I was aware of in Kingston.
Right.
Because we were about 20 miles from Kingston.
Okay.
But in any event, I won a scholarship to Queen's, and I decided to go into what was called applied science. Which today is called engineering and applied science, but applied science at Queen's at that time encompasses all of the engineering disciplines, but they had one called engineering chemistry. So I graduated with that, and then I took a master's degree at Queen's as well in physical chemistry, and then went on to the University of Toronto for another 2 years for the PhD.
Wow.
Also work in physical chemistry. But I had decided that I didn't want to go in academia. I didn't think I'd be a very good professor. But I was interested in research, and Dow Chemical in Canada had just opened a new, what they called, exploratory research lab at their Sarnia facility. And I considered myself qualified to do independent research. And so for about 10 years, I did that. The rationale was that we choose to do research that we think might have some longer-term benefit for the company. After a period of time, I was offered a managerial position in plastics technology. And then, to my surprise, a couple of management opportunities in manufacturing. And one of those was the one that took me to British Columbia as site manager of the facility out there. Then I came back to Sarnia as manager of research and development. And then my last job was a corporate job, director of environmental sciences. We got very much involved with environmental activities at that time, especially government activity.
Okay.
So when I retired, we moved to Kingston, having grown up in that area.
Yeah.
And we wanted to retire in a university town. When we moved back to Kingston, I got somewhat involved at Queen's, too. I took a number of credit courses in the theological college there.
Oh, what a departure from chemistry. You went from science to spiritual. That's very interesting.
Well, I'll tell you, I chose courses that didn't have any final exams.
Oh, wait till the pearly gates, Harold. You'll find out. You'll find out about the final exams.
Well,
Goodness.
I had enough exam experience in the first 25 years of my life, to want to avoid that.
I find it interesting to hear you say you didn't think you had teacher in you, because I could listen to you, and I know Doug as well, for forever talking about everything.
What an education you had, Harold. I left school at 15, but boy, what a wonderful life I've had. I wish I had a better education than I got.
Yeah, well, I had not listened to a podcast until this afternoon. And the first one I listened to was the one with Ron Schlegel.
Ah.
And he made a comment to the effect that it's not education that counts, it's learning that counts. And the two are not synonymous.
Absolutely.
Life is learning.
It is. It is.
And, when we were in Kingston, we went to a program called Later Life Learning. And it was well named because we were all, at least in our late 60s or 70s at that time. But now that we're in our 90s, there's no reason why we shouldn't still retain that philosophy, I think.
Absolutely. And Harold, I know that many people listening today are going, wait, this guy's 92? So we do have to ask you if you have a philosophy on, to the best of anyone's ability, because there are so many mitigating factors over which we have no control whatsoever, as of course in the case of your wife with Parkinson's and dementia. But if you could tell us what you think your key, not only to longevity, but to the sharpness of your acuity, your mind, what would that be, Harold?
Well, I often say I'm glad that I'm here, but I'm glad also that I know that I'm here.
Oh, amen.
How true.
That is beautiful.
Well, my wife has no quality of life. She just is in her wheelchair or in bed.
Right.
Same as my wife, Harold.
Yeah, and quality of life revolves around still being able to do things that, or participate in things that are of interest to you. And when you lose your mental capability, you lose that opportunity.
And so much of that, of course, again, and I will qualify this by saying that there are many things that are out of people's hands, but there is so much benefit to using what you've got, to keeping your mind sharp, to doing Wordle or crosswords or word searches or watching shows that are intellectually stimulating it or reading and all of the things that you're doing. Harold, you're a wonder, and we are just so grateful to have had this time together. And that's all I can say about that without getting sued or something. So you know who I'm singing.
Of course.
Oh.
Well, I say also, life without laughs is not life. We need to have things to generate a laugh still.
Okay.
One thing I do, I have a friend in the village by the Arboretum who each morning he sends a couple of emails that he has received entitled Your Morning Smile.
Ah.
If I think they're appropriate, I copy them and then read them to my table mates or some other people. But they have to have a laugh associated with them for me to do that.
Do you have one on you?
I can leave you with one little joke.
Yes, please.
Please.
It said, I sent my friends a copy of a selfie that I took, and they said, we hope you'll get well soon.
There you go.
Anyway, this has been a pleasure for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Harold.
And for us, Harold.
The pleasure was ours. Oh, and yours too, I hope, as you listened. Thanks to Katie Lammert and Jen Gould for their assistance, and of course our guest, the amazing Harold Quinn. And thanks again for sharing some time here with us, because this was our golden 50th episode of Elder Wisdom. We'll be back soon with our 51st episode and a brand new season, so be sure and subscribe so you don't miss it. We so look forward to reconnecting with you then. Meantime, Please do share your thoughts and opinions on social media for us using hashtag Elder Wisdom and help others find us on this green bench. And if you would, take a moment to rate and review the Elder Wisdom podcast, or you can just go to elderwisdom.ca, find the link, and maybe fill out the Elder Wisdom Pledge while you're there. Thanks again. And on behalf of Doug Robinson, I'm Erin Davis, and your spot on the green bench is ready and waiting.
Elder Wisdom, Stories from the Green Bench, is brought to you by Schlegel Villages, a complete continuum of care, offering independent living to long-term care, celebrating and honoring the wisdom of the elder. To learn more about us, please go to our website, schlegelvillages.com.